Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Cyber Narratives. I'm your host Mathieu, Cyber Doctor Peto, and today we are going on a trip that is both far away in terms of distance and in time. That's right, we're looking back at a story that is almost 3,000 years old and that happened in Eastern China. You might be saying, hey, cybersecurity is a new science, right? It's about 30, maybe 40 years old, and yet you're telling me that we can apply principles from that long ago? Absolutely. You'll see in this episode, we're going to take a look at principles that are eternal, that will always apply so that your organization can stay on top of risk today and for the next thousands of years. At least if we're still here to talk about it, of course. Great. Today, we are going to learn three things. So first, we'll do an introduction of the book so that you know what it's about. And then we'll hear three quotes from the book that, let's say, were important to me and that I want to share with you so that we can learn about cybersecurity and see how you can protect yourself today, tomorrow, and 1,000 years after that. Are you ready? Let's go! Alright folks, we are ready to talk about our book, which is called The Art of War by Sun Tzu, who was a general, but also a writer, a poet, a philosopher. The guy had so many talents, it is incredible. He wrote this book almost 3,000 years ago, and it was used in China for military purposes, for training the military, for thousands of years, and then it came in Europe and then the United States in the 18th century. So, and then ever since, it's been used in military training for the highest generals, like for instance, at the school West Point, which is the highest university, the most important university for training generals today for the US Army. So it's quite a significant reading. And it hasn't just been a reading useful in the military context, it's also very important in the business context. You see, there's many things that can be learned from how to lead people, right? Because war is about leading people towards, well, not lead people towards anything, but it leads people, right? And it deals with conflict and how to beat an opponent. It's a very straightforward thing to understand. But when you think about it, this is super applicable in so many domains today, like business, like cybersecurity. So with this said, let's get going into the quotes. All right, here is our first quote. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb yourself in battle. I'm going to go one more time over the part that I like to talk about. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So, what do you think about it, folks? If you know yourself, if you know the enemy, you will find success. You will find success in your battles. So, you might ask yourself, Matthew, I know myself. I know my company. I'm taking it to a business part. What do you mean that I don't know myself? Well, I'm going to ask you these three questions about your company. First of all, why did your customers choose to do business with you? This is a very important question. Ask it to yourself right now. Take a few seconds to think about it. Why did your customers choose to do business with you? Great. I hope you've got that out. It's a pretty important question. Now, second, how is your information involved in creating value for these customers? So, the value that your company has, how dependent is it on the information that you possess? All right, do you have it? Okay. Last question. What would happen if your computers did not work and your data was leaked? So what do you think about these questions? Were you able to get all the answers from these questions on top of your head? Because I've had conversations with many CEOs across organizations in France that were below 2,500 endpoints, and not one of them was able to give me the answer to all of these questions without saying, let me check with my team first. So understand these risks, really take into consideration what would happen. This is the know yourself part. This takes a lot of time, and we're going to go through examples to illustrate this. So this is the know yourself part. Now let's talk about the enemy. The enemy here, you might be tempted once again to say, hey, the enemy is a hacker. That's quite simplifying. And you might think, hey, it's someone that's like in the movies, right? Wearing a hoodie, who goes solo, who's a little bit antisocial, stays in the basement somewhere. That might be true for some of them, but for the most part, it's not. A lot of the time, as we've seen throughout these episodes, attackers are people who are organized, who work in groups and work differently. And they might be someone more basic than you think. Like, think for instance, who could want your company to suffer? Think about it. Perhaps a competitor, maybe what's called a hacktivist, so someone that works with a purpose, like Anonymous, or let's say, different organizations that might want your organization to go down for social purposes. Now, maybe a nation state could want to attack you if you're in something strategic for government, or an employee of your own organization. Think about it. Imagine you've had to let go an employee for X or Y reason, and they want to get back at you. This could very much be a hacker that could be just as dangerous as all the other ones. Ask yourself this: could someone try to hurt me? You always have this one person who will want to hurt you for financial gain. No matter who you are, whether you're the worst company in the world or the best company in the world, they will attack you. They attack hospitals for money. They are hackers that do it for the money. What they'll try to do is put you in a position where you have to pay them in order to keep your activity running, usually running what's called ransomware. So these hackers are always there and will always chase you. Now, someone could try to steal your intellectual property as well. So the documents that you hold dear, like your customer data, but also, and most importantly, the information of how you do what you do, the sales that you have, the client list, so many things like this that are critical and will be a big, big, big liability in case it were to leak to somewhere else. So let's take a company, for instance. We've talked a lot about what it looked like, but let's give an example. Let's say we are Coca-Cola. Let's think about the risk we might have in this situation. So let's think a bit about the competitors. We could have Pepsi that might be trying to steal, information about what the launches that we're going to have, right? What if we're releasing another soda that is clear again, like they did in the 1990s? What about the pricing of this? What about our strategy? What's our long-term strategy? Maybe we don't want Pepsi to know about that, right? Another thing that could be happening is, we're Coca-Cola. We have health activist issues, right? What if a health activist were to disturb us while we're trying to release a new product? What would be the impact of that? How big would it be? What events are coming up? Let's say the Olympic Games are coming up, right? And we're Coca-Cola. We're sponsoring them. What would happen if, while the whole world is seeing our logo, what would happen if we get, let's say, a cyber attack? I don't know. I'm not Coca-Cola, but these are all questions that Coca-Cola is asking themselves right now. And you, what are the different things in your company that you could think about that would cause some hassle? So these are two things. I want to give you one more. What if you had an employee that worked at Coca-Cola? He might be an employee, or she might be an employee that was once working in finance, or that is working in finance, or in any place in the company, and they want to get financial information about Coca-Cola in order to predict how the stock will go, whether it will go up or down, and bet on the market with this information, which is super illegal, super bad for the company, and might get you some lawsuits. So the hackers can't come from inside, and it's up to you to understand where the attacker might come from in order to prevent them from getting what they want and protecting yourself above and beyond what you need at the right level of risk, right? So with all of this done, you'll have the very first step towards understanding your risk. Congratulations! So we've seen in this part 1 about how you understand yourself and the enemy. Now let's move to part 2, strategic planning. All right, let's get started with the quote. It is that in war, the victorious strategist only seeks battle after the victory has been won, whereas he who is destined to defeat first fights and afterwards looks for victory. Did that quote make sense to you? What it means is that good warriors will win first before they go to battle. And so much of the time, what I see happening in cybersecurity is that companies will first be attacked before they start thinking about how to recover. I mean, think about it. We don't do this in anywhere else in cybersecurity. Think about firefighting, for instance. Would a firefighter just show up to the place and start learning how to fight fire? Or would a pilot start flying a plane without having a flight plan or a checklist? Or even, would a professional team start playing a match without having a match plan or deciding it a few minutes before the match or during the match? That doesn't happen. And yet in cybersecurity, it's something we constantly do. So here how to avoid this trap. We're going to ask ourselves a few questions in 3 parts. And then afterwards, we'll have a lot more understanding of where we stand within our risk and what we can do to mitigate them if we want to. In short, what you need is a business continuity plan. I did this with a client. Here's how you can do yours right now. The first thing that you need to identify is which business processes are critical to your business. So let's say that you lead an aquarium. You are the CEO of an aquarium. Congratulations. So, what are the different business processes that are critical to your organization? I found 2. Number 1, having healthy fish and pretty aquariums. Because if you do not have the right healthy fish, no one will come to your aquarium. It will be a little bit sad to have an aquarium without fish, right? So this is something that's absolutely critical to your business. And number 2 is ticket sales, right? Because aquariums are quite a low margin type of venture because you have such huge costs from all the fish. So you want to be able to sell your tickets. Good, so we've identified 2 critical business processes. This is the first step, we've done it. Now, what is the second step? The second step is figuring out how dependent are these business processes to a correct functioning of our IT. So far, so good. So, for instance, maybe maintenance of the building is not really reliant on IT. But nowadays, we see that more and more things are reliant on IT. Like, for instance, taking care of the fish. We need a lot of IT equipment, right? I'm guessing we have some things to measure the pH of the water, the temperature, and different things like this. Are they all dependent on the IT? What would happen in case the aquarium, the IT supporting the aquarium data were to stop working? What would we do? Do we ask ourselves this question? And also, for the payments, is it dependent on the functioning of the IT? Is it dependent on us? Is it dependent on the card provider? What can we do if something happens with one current card provider? Just asking ourselves, what are the different things that could go wrong within these critical processes? So we have the cards. We also have the website because we are selling our tickets through the website. What would happen if the website were to go down? Website go down all the time, whether it's because of a fault or a cyber attack or whatever, website go down all the time. What would happen? Did we think about that? So once we've done these 2 things, which are, once again, identifying critical business processes, and number 2, thinking about how dependent these critical business processes are to how our business works, we can start thinking about the continuation plan. Now, I really want to highlight, we have to think about these really in depth. This is 80% of the work, thinking about these questions, asking ourselves these questions. What would happen if? Because the continuity plan is the last piece of the puzzle, the top of the iceberg, the plan. It seems very easy to do, but the real work stands in thinking about how to get there. So let's go back to our aquarium. Let's say that we want to, the whole goal of a continuity plan is to make sure that we can, in case something goes wrong, take the risk down so we can have other ways of doing it. So let's say that we've done the analysis of how taking care of our fish is dependent on IT. Here's what we found out. Our fish have a 90% chance of survival if they are not taken care of between 2 weeks. If for 2 weeks we don't have any IT, 90% of our fish will survive. So it's pretty good. We are willing to take this risk. But there is a shark tank, which is the most important tank for the whole aquarium, and it's driving most of the customers to see the sharks. So there, we cannot even have a 10% of losing these sharks, right? So we're going to adapt a different process. This is all about continuity. It's knowing the risk and making sure that we are able to, one, accept it, or two, do something about it in order to make it less, or change it, or make it into something else. So here we've clearly understood the root cause and finding out ways of making it different. Amazing, right? So now we've resolved the first problem about the fish being able to survive. Now what about the revenue? That's the second part. Well, there's two parts to revenue, right? There's card payment in person, which you cannot do without having a proper IT, without having a working IT. So this would be impacted in case of a cyber attack. We did the analysis, it would be impacted. So what can we do in order to reduce the risk there? We can have maybe multiple card payments, we can have redundancy, or what if this is super important to us? We cannot have, what if we've determined that we cannot survive more than 4 hours without having a proper working IT? Then perhaps we can start thinking about solutions like having ATMs outside of the aquarium in case things were to go wrong. Perhaps some of our customers can go by there. But all of this, just thinking about this, is significant in the way that we handle risk. And for the website, for instance, what we could do is try and encourage sales through partners, perhaps, right? So perhaps some of our partners could sell more tickets because we don't just sell on a website, we also sell on Airbnb experiences or another website. So perhaps these can help us in case we start having a cyber attack. So this is what business continuity is all about. And this is why, in my opinion, Sun Tzu decided to say that warriors go think about victory and then they go to war. Think about the risk, think about what you'll end up having or whether the risk that you're facing, and then you can move towards solving the risk and really developing yourself against these risks. Good, so we've talked about how to prepare for an attack. Now I have a really good question, which is all about the who. Who should prepare for the attack? What are the roles within the organization? Let's move on to part 3. All right, folks, are you ready for part 3? I kept the best for last because this is not anything I found on any forum out there. It is just my pure curiosity that I had to search for. So let me explain. The book here talked a lot about this idea of a sovereign. A sovereign, as far as I understand it, is the leader of a nation that leads politically, culturally, maybe also militarily, but mostly is a generalist, right? And that book had a few mentions of it, but not a lot. So I did some research about it, and ultimately I found a version which comes from over 1,000 years later, 1,200 years later, around the year 200, where a Chinese historian went around and collected the thoughts around this book, The Art of War, and in it mentioned a quote from someone that was close to Sun Tzu, who is the author of the book, and mentions a bit what the role of the sovereign is within the military scope. So let me read you this quote. "It is the sovereign's function to give broad instructions. but to decide on the battle, it is the function of the general. So little, so much. Let me explain here. What it says here is that the general will take care of the physics of the battles, how it will actually take place, and the sovereign will take place of the vision, which makes sense, right? When you think about it, in today's cases, most of the heads of states are also the head of the army. At least that's how I've been raised with my political view coming from France. Emmanuel Macron is currently the chief of all the army in France. And I believe it's also the case in the United States. But Macron is also a generalist, right? He must know about different things that are happening in the country, about economics, which is where he comes from, or different pieces of, politics, right? How to argument, how to do different things. And of course, he cannot do on top of this dealing with the army. He has a person for that. And so the interaction between these two people is that one gives the overview of the strategy, where does the country want to go, how do we want to develop, what are our interests, what do we have to defend, and with this, the general will actually decide the battles. How do we actually invest the money, how do we take care of things? And so often I'm going to shift now to cybersecurity, because this is something that I see and once again makes absolutely no sense. We'll have a CEO, so we'll consider that there's the sovereign, hire a CISO, and just say afterwards, so Chief Information Security Officer, a head of information security, and they'll say, I hired you, now you go and protect me. And that's it, that's the end of this relationship. They don't really have a relationship. The CISO will report to someone within the organization that will not let them talk to other people, and they'll be stuck there. And so what happens when the general does not have an idea of what to do, which direction, when it does not have a direction, there's many things that can happen. I actually did some research on this. There can be insubordination, there can be a lot of mess going around, a lack of direction, people not knowing what to do, different projects, a lot of infighting. Basically, it doesn't really lead anywhere. And yet, once again, so many organizations have their CISOs report to someone else and not have contact with the decision maker, the ultimate sovereign. It's incredible to me, because you spend a lot of money on this and yet you expect it to be done. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. You have to spend some time and understand the people that are with you there. When you think about it, it's just like a president would do. You'd have to give where we want to be in 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years. And then, the CISO could do something with this information. Else, it's very good. I hope these 3 points make sense for you. I have a little bonus for you, just because this one is fun. I learned a ton learning this book, and I was searching around it, and I found something quite cool. There is a concept in this book which is misleading the army. So whenever one thing is happening, you want to show the opponent a different thing. Whenever, let's say you're weak, you want to appear strong. Whenever you're strong, you want to appear weak, so that the enemy never knows when to attack you. And so there's a really clever concept that I learned about while doing some research about this in cybersecurity, which is the concept of honeypot. That is, a honeypot basically attracts people to come in, and so that is not real. So let me explain how it works in cybersecurity. You're going to have a system that looks quite a bit secure. You put some things on it, and the thing is, it's an absolute ghost town. This IT system does not have any relevant information, does not have any real employees there. It's just a playground to observe how hackers are behaving within this environment. So it's awesome because it will do 2 things. One, attackers will waste their time. And there's no better thing to send someone away than wasting their time. Like, think about scammers, for instance, that, if eventually they spend too much time on you, they'll move on to someone else. So that's what you can do. That's a great way of getting rid of them. And another thing that is very important is able to see how they are acting. So, and because we know that there's not supposed to be any employees there, most of the detections will be real detections of actually harmful things happening. So with this, you're going to be able to catch the hackers, but also catch malicious people within your organization that are trying to access some things they shouldn't. So it's pretty smart of a technology that I wanted to share with you. Now, if you want to implement this, just for you to know, it's quite, in my opinion, it's quite a complex thing to implement. You need to have the people to check over the results and do the different things. But if you have the people, if you have the time, this is absolutely amazing. Do it. But for most of you, it's just something cool to play around with. I just felt like sharing with you. Hey, so we've reached the end of our podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. So I'm just going to do a recap of what we learned so far. You need to understand yourself and your adversary. Make a list of the top things that you have that are important to your business. What is critical to serve your customers? What is critical for your financial survival? Make a list of this. Then analyze how IT is relevant to the activities that you're doing. How is it important? How is it affected? And then you can come up with a business continuity plan. It says, hey, if this doesn't work, what can I do? So important, as we've seen with the aquarium example. And then in the relationship part, my French accent took over, you need to have a place where the CEO and the CISO are able to be on the same length. The CISO takes the battles while the CEO gives the direction of the boat. And these two are absolutely incredibly important. Congratulations, you've made it until the end of the podcast. To celebrate together, I propose we read one last quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Let's go. The art of war teaches us not to rely on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him. Not on the chance of his not attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our position unsaliable. Hey, I want to congratulate you. If you're here until the end, it means that you're serious about your cybersecurity. So keep it up, make sure to follow, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, folks.